Welcoming Dr. Ellie Zarabian, host of From Chaos to Connection, growing from pain toward community. Are you ready to make the most of your challenges while moving ahead with your dreams? Do you want your spiritual growth to be part of your healing while living your life with purpose? On Chaos to Connection, you will find resources to transform your difficulties into connections with others. Change is achievable. Dr. Ellie helps you make change both within and in the world. Learn to heal past traumas, become more self-assured, and take action in the world. No matter your spiritual background or cultural heritage, we will work together to transform pain and trauma to community and well-being. You can make this world a better place, starting with yourself. From Chaos to Connection starts now.
Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Ellie Zarabian, and this is my show From Chaos to Connection. If you're interested in the topic of personal growth and building better relationships at home and in the world, then you're definitely in the right place. In my last podcast, titled The Journey So Far, I summarized the key points of all the episodes and mentioned that I would like to give you some time and space to process the material and make it your own. Making it your own means taking the information that works for you and letting go of what didn't. Then take the time to absorb the material so that it becomes a part of you and the lessons can be practiced and applied in your daily life. Given that we only have one more episode left for this series, I thought I would like to take the opportunity in this podcast and discuss the origin story of these podcasts, or what led me to create this series. I know I initially shared, I started to share my own origin story with you and how my own formative years motivated me to study psychology and spirituality. And also, having dealt with a great deal of conflict and chaos in my own life, my intention for creating these podcasts has been to help you become more resilient in the wake of all that's going on in the world. The goal has basically been to teach you to learn effective ways to manage conflict more constructively, both at home and out in the world. But this episode titled Beginnings goes back even further than that. I initially came up with the title a long time ago and only recently decided to sit down and meditate on the topic. While I was meditating on the word beginnings, something interesting happened, which I want to share with you. I started to recount the words. In the beginning, there was the Word, and the Word was with God. I was immediately struck by this because I realized at that moment that I was probably recounting a biblical verse. I was intrigued by what was coming through me because, if you recall from my previous podcasts, I had shared that I did not have any religious training growing up in my native country of Iran because women were not encouraged to study the holy books. But I know enough to know that these words come from the Bible. So I came out of my meditation and decided to look up the words online. Sure enough, I saw that the verse comes from the passage in John, book 1 of King James's Bible. So I went back and wrote down the exact words. In the beginning, there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It was in the beginning with God. All things were made through God, and without God was not anything made that was made. I had to pause for a second and take these words in. Here I was wondering what to discuss in this episode on the topic of beginnings, and while in meditation, this verse came to me that says, in the beginning, there was nothing but God, and that everything is made in God and through God. Suddenly, I felt a profound sense of awe come over me, and I thought, how amazing. Over the years, I have learned to trust my intuition. And when something like this comes to me during meditation, I take it seriously and take my time to sit with it and let inner wisdom guide me along. So I sat in contemplation for a long time and began to formulate what I wanted to share with you today. I found myself going back and thinking about the Abrahamic family and their relationship with each other. After all, the premise of these podcasts has been about building better relationships at home and in the world. And like most relationships that are dealing with a great deal of conflict and chaos, the Abrahamic family is also faced with some serious challenges of their own. As we all know, the current global scenario and how they are getting along both independently and with each other is unfortunately not that great. Sadly, there seems to be so much discord and fighting going around. In fact, the conflict is so palpable that we're all deeply affected by it. We can no longer assume that it's happening somewhere out there, but rather we're all seeing it get played out in our own backyard, right here in our own neighborhoods, as well as around the world. Whether it's happening here in the US with all the mass shootings or elsewhere around the world, it seems that racial, political, and religious tensions are getting played out with senseless acts of violence everywhere we look. This is a crisis on a global scale and is happening everywhere, with innocent people and children becoming the target while the rest of us stand on the sidelines and watch helplessly. This crisis I'm referring to is happening both within and between groups, meaning there is just as much conflict and chaos among people of the same group as well as between different groups. No one group is immune to aggression and violence these days. So, what could be contributing to all this chaos and violence? Well, as I'm sure you can imagine, this is a very extensive topic, and there isn't one simple or single answer or solution to addressing this problem. I personally would need a few sessions to address this topic more holistically and comprehensively. However, today I can share with you one important explanation that psychologists who study human behavior and interaction have researched, and then give you a suggestion on how to begin to address this issue, starting with yourself. The problem of committing hate crimes initially begins with the way we think and construct our lives centered around segregation and separation. Regardless of our cultural, racial, or religious background, as a people, we tend to believe that creating an artificial bubble around ourselves and our own people called an in-group gives us a sense of protection and safety from harm. If you look at your own immediate environment, you will see that you belong to many different subgroups, from your immediate family to your extended family, from the religious group, sect, or denomination you belong to the different political party you identify with, to the different class or caste system you belong to the divisions created around race, gender, and sexual orientation. We are consistently categorizing ourselves and each other into groups that define us and give us a false sense of identity as well as safety. The result of all this extreme in-grouping or categorizing and sectioning ourselves off from the rest of the people forms the thinking that one's in-group has the right mindset or mentality over the others. This is just how our brains work. We do this unconsciously. As we identify more and more with our own in-group's way of thinking and behaving, we become more and more intolerant towards other ways of thinking and behaving. Let me say this again. As we identify more and more with our own in-group's way of thinking and behaving, we become more and more intolerant towards others' way of thinking and behaving. This is how we eventually lose our connection to the rest of the world. By striving to keep our own bubble intact and together, we actually end up cutting ourselves off and even shutting ourselves out from the rest of humanity. This is a natural process that happens when we grow up thinking that in-group mentality is good and it is what will help us and our people survive as a group or as a people. Psychologists also refer to this type of thinking as an us and them mentality. Research shows that this way of thinking and behaving is actually counterproductive to forming a unified and cohesive sense of self and other, which in turn can cause many of the problems we see in the world today. The definition of an in-group mentality is essentially the groups to which we belong to. In-group members have positive views of each other and give their own members preferential treatment. Also, members of an in-group have feelings of attachment, sympathy, and affection towards other members of their own group because their identity is based on having the same mindset. An outgroup, on the other hand, consists of anyone who does not belong to one's own in-group. An outgroup is always defined by an individual with reference to his or her own in-group. For example, if your in-group is the Democratic Party, then the outgroup is naturally the Republican Party and vice versa. Outgroups are marked by a sense of difference and frequently by some degree of antagonism and even hostility. Again, this is natural. We do this unconsciously. This hard division between an in-group and an out-group mindset creates an us versus them mentality. And as soon as we adhere to the norms of our own in-group and see ourselves as an us, then we have no choice but to see others who are different from us as a them. When we see each other as separate entities, isolated from one another, we lose our sense of interconnectedness or our connection to each other as part of the human family. When we lose our connection with each other, it's easier to become antagonists and even enemies of one another. When people continuously focus on what makes them different from the outgroup rather than united as a people, then we develop the permission structure that allows us to displace our own undesirable thoughts and feelings onto the outgroup. Displacing our own undesirable thoughts and feelings onto others then gives us the false sense of entitlement that we have the right and even the duty to go out and cause harm to the outgroup through acts of aggression, violence, war, and terrorism. This is the process of dehumanizing the other while giving us a sense of righteous entitlement to commit acts of violence towards others while justifying our own behavior as the correct way to behave. In other words, once we have taken the us and them mentality far enough, it becomes far easier to engage in acts of violence and other crimes against humanity. Let's take a short break here, and when we return, I will talk about taking the steps towards becoming part of the solution rather than remaining as part of the problem. We'll be right back. See you soon. Welcome back. I'm Dr. Ellie, and today's podcast is about shifting the mindset that creates an us and them mentality, which ends up promoting a sense of separation in our global community and makes us more prone to committing acts of aggression and violence towards humanity. In this episode, I have addressed the mindset of an in-group versus an out-group mindset and how a dualistic mindset sets us up against one another. When we see ourselves separate from our human family, or we lose our sense of being interconnected as citizens of the world, we become more and more isolated in our immediate and small bubble of existence. And with that, we become more and more intolerant and unaccepting of differences. When we adhere to an in-group mentality, it's natural to feel threatened by those who are different from us. And when we are confronted with our differences, the natural reaction is to want to shield or protect ourselves from what seems to be different or alien to us. When we feel threatened by the outgroup, it becomes easy to resort to aggression and violence in order to gain feelings of safety and control. But we all know that hate is not the answer. In fact, we are seeing the effects of hatred continuously in our own communities, as well as the world around us. So, what can we do as a people and as global citizens to help offset some of the negative effects of an in-group mentality? Well, if the result of an in-group mentality is to see yourself separate and divided from the whole, then the solution is to find or look for commonalities that transcend those differences. For example, one way to think of this is to ask yourself, what do we have in common as an Abrahamic family? We all know what separates us, but rarely do we ever think about what actually unifies us. That one commonality will transcend the us and them mentality, and instead will focus us on what is similar. If you go back to the beginning of my talk when I shared the words, in the beginning, the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It becomes clear that the one thing that all the Abrahamic religions have in common is our shared belief in a higher power. Going back to our beginning, we in the Abrahamic traditions may have our own name for the divine, but our concept of the divine is the same. And that sameness is what transcends all of our differences. One power, one presence, one God, omniscient and omnipresent for all of us. Again, we may have different names for the Almighty, but our belief in this higher power is one and the same. Even if there are different paths to the Almighty, when we focus our attention in the right place, our differences become insignificant. But the reverse is also true. If we focus our attention entirely on what sets us apart from each other, then we will always find ways to disagree and argue. This is just human nature. So instead, if we focus our collective effort towards what unites us, we will be helping to offset some of the challenges that we are creating and facing in the world. Today is 9/11. And for your homework, I would like for you to challenge yourself. Pick a group that you are in opposition with and see if you can shift your focus from looking at what is different between you and this group to what is the same. Each time your focus shifts to looking at what is different, bad, or negative about this group, see if you can bring your attention back to what is similar between you and them. And then notice how you feel over time. I know what I'm asking of you is not easy, but it's a good practice. If you consider yourself a spiritual person with good intentions, then see this as a test. Are you able to shift your focus towards the divine, especially in relation to your so-called enemies? As usual, I'm happy to get your comments and questions, and we'll get back to you with a response. In the meantime, this concludes our 11th episode. My next episode will be our last one together in this series, and I plan on leaving the session entirely open for you to call in and say hello or goodbye. After the final episode, I plan on taking some time off from social media so that I can focus my attention on teaching. But I will be checking my inbox on a regular basis in order to stay connected with my friends. I'm Dr. Ellie Zarabian. This is the Transformation Network, from chaos to connection. I look forward to seeing you soon. In the meantime, take good care and be well.
You have been listening to Dr. Ellie Zarabian, host of From Chaos to Connection. Tune in every second and fourth Monday at 2 p.m. Pacific on TransformationTalkRadio.com for more resources and tools to help with healing on your journey of life. You can impact the globe in the most powerful way possible. Whatever your spiritual background and cultural heritage is, you can transform pain and trauma into building community and connection. Join Dr. Ellie in identifying what you need to heal within and in our world. For more information, visit centeronpeace.com. That's centeronpeace.com.